Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to another edition of Ars Boni today. Today is a kind of a special day because it's a kind of wrap up or repetition of something that happened already almost a year ago. So when we started with Ars Boni on the 3rd of April 2020, the idea then was that we could give an overview about the different national situations in the countries of origin of all our members of the team. And Catherine Altobelli was then the very first who kindly volunteered to join us to talk with us about the situation in Italy on the 3rd of April 2020. So the very first edition of Ars Boni is a conversation with her. I watched it again in preparation of today about the situation there. And as it's now a year that we have been struggling with this crisis also here in Vienna and in Austria, we thought that it would be a good idea to do this round again with all the lessons that we learned so far. And luckily, I have the privilege to say that in this year, it's not just one Italian. So Catherine is again with us. So we have two of them at the moment in the team. Biagio Distefano is new. He joined the team within this year. So the only modification from the concept from last year in a way is that we have two people speaking. Both of them, as I mentioned, are lawyers, both of them working at the Department of Innovation and Digitalization. Both of them are Italian, both of them writing their PhD at the moment in the organizational context of the department. Catherine has a career track that led her to the Netherlands in many ways, inter alia. She did her master there and her bachelor, her master. In addition, I'm sorry, I mixed this up now. Her master in Edinburgh and her bachelor in the Netherlands. So she has a background in the UK and in the Netherlands. Biagio has a very international background as well, but also important roots at the University of Bologna, which is the university that mainly takes care of the organizational aspect of the the PhD program he's involved in. So very happy to have both of you here. Thank you for your time. Let me simply start with the usual question, which is, how are the rules at the moment in Italy and how have they developed in the last year?
Yeah, so I'm very happy to be again back to Ars Boni. And in general, I think it has been quite a long year, but the situation at the moment is not too different to how it was when we had the first session of Ars Boni. So currently, Italy is in lockdown and is going through the third wave of the pandemic. And how it works is that currently regions and provinces are classified into 4 areas: red, orange, yellow, and white. And these correspond to the 3 sort of risk scenarios for which different specific restrictive measures are foreseen. So this classification is based on ordinances which are issued by the Ministry of Health relating to the specific area. And as of today, 11 regions are in orange and 10 in red. So what this means in practice is that in the red areas, it's prohibited to move within your own municipality. It's prohibited to visit another household. All schools are fully closed, and all shops, apart from the essential ones, are also closed. So this is really a strict lockdown. So you need to have a form every single time you leave your house. Whereas in the regions within the orange area, it is not recommended, but still possible to move within the municipality. It is, however, prohibited to leave the municipality apart from specific reasons such as work, study, health reasons, and other necessities, again with a form. Schools are partially open, so elementary and middle schools are open with masks, of course, and high schools have at least 50% distance learning. Shops are open in the orange areas. Restaurants for takeaways are open, and you can visit one other household with maximum 2 other people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Apart from this, the more general rules from the yellow and white areas also apply. So curfew between 10 and 5 a.m., and universities are closed apart from very specific labs and activities for first-year students.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's very briefly. Of course, there are a lot of specific rules depending on the area, but at the moment, most of Italy is in the not the whole of Italy is actually in the two toughest lockdown levels, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And how is it to travel to Italy or from Italy? Any specific rules there?
Yes, I can answer that. Well, there are some regulations regarding travel from and to Italy. And specifically, there's an annex to the decree that regulates lockdown rules. And in this annex, there are lists of country divided by risk levels. Specifically, there's a general rule where people can move to and from Italy, but if the country they're moving from and to falls into one of the higher risk country, then some limitations apply. For instance, moving to Italy from Austria, that should be in a lower risk area, but has been moved to tougher rules, implies some strict regulations, such as having to take antigen or PCR tests before boarding, and then after getting to Italy, and then having to undergo quarantine. There are, of course, some exceptions, and the exceptions are the usual, so work reasons or necessity, and or re-entry to a place of residence. But in general, the countries that are divided into risk levels can be moved to tougher regulations by the ministry, with an ordinance by the Ministry of Health. And this is the case, for instance, within the country in Europe. I wouldn't say in the European Union, because also UK is in that, which is, as of now, Austria and United Kingdom are the countries in the geographic area of Europe that are going through stricter rules. And also this applies to Brazil. And for all the countries that are not listed in the annex, the general rule is tough. People cannot travel from and to those countries unless specific reasons apply.
So all this, I would assume, has a lot of legal foundations and a lot of laws and a lot of regulations. And the question I would have is in how far they were challenged in the last year, and whether there are any courts decisions or any other legal developments that are of interest to our audience that you would like to report, both of you perhaps.
Yeah, so maybe chronologically, I can start from the very first one, which is quite an interesting challenge to the legal basis of lockdown, because it was a decision by what in Italy we call a justice of peace, one could say, so a judge for like minor matters. And this was in Frosinone in July last year, where basically in a case concerning a fine for someone who was not following the lockdown rules, the judge concluded that since the lockdown rules are established through these, let's say, legal tools, the DPCM, which are decrees of the President of the Council of Ministers, and these were declared on the basis of a declaration of a state of emergency, which was deemed to be unlawful due to the fact that this state of emergency, which stems from the Civil Protection Code of Italy, does not include a health risk as a possibility of a state of emergency, but it deals with natural disasters or events caused by human activity, such as ecological disasters. So this was quite technical, but the legal basis for the state of emergency was deemed unlawful. And so this was the first issue. And the second problem, which was then also included in a case that Biagio will be talking about, relates to a violation of the right to personal freedom, as especially the very first decree was effectively obliging individuals to remain at home. And this was deemed to be in violation of Article 13 of the Constitution, as it effectively really establish a general and absolute prohibition on moving outside one's home. So on the basis of this, because this decree used by back then Conte, the president of the Council of Ministers, is an administrative act, it could have been declared inapplicable by this type of ordinary judge. So the question was not and did not have to be referred to the Constitutional Court. So that's the first case, which, as I said, is very peculiar because this is a judge that deals with minor matters and was never obviously referred to any other court.
And I can take it from here and talk about the second case if you want, which is a relatively more recent one. And it was actually a criminal case that involved two people. And basically, as Catherine said earlier, when people leave their home, they need to have a form with them, a self-certification form, where they specify the reasons why they are leaving their place. And the case that I'm talking about involved two people that made false declarations on the form, and for this reason were indicted because they gave false declarations to the public authority, to the police. Interestingly, a judge in Reggio Emilia, for the same reason that Catherine told us about, decided to acquit the defendant, exactly because he deemed the DPCM inapplicable to the case. And this was exactly because the DPCM back then mandated everybody to stay home, which is in fact, according to the judge, a limitation of personal freedom that falls within the protection of Article 13 of the Italian Constitutions. The Article 13 of the Italian Constitution requires that every kind of personal freedom violation cannot occur if not by a motivated judgment by the judicial authority. And so not even law could theoretically force people to stay home, let alone an administrative act. And for this reason, using a law back from 1980 in the 1800, the judge deemed the decree inapplicable and acquitted the defendant, even though their violation was to give false information to the public authority. But since they were forced to give false information based on a decree that was inapplicable, then they were acquitted. And this is also interesting because some scholars try to reconnect the stay-at-home order under Article 16 of the Italian Constitution, which states that in principle, everybody can roam freely within the borders of Italy, except when the law says otherwise for specific reasons, among which, of course, health hazard. However, the judge deemed that this was not the case because if the geographic area is not exactly specified, but it's generally the whole territory, this becomes effectively a violation of personal freedom because people cannot, in fact, leave their home. And this is basically some sort of house arrest, which can only be issued by a judicial authority based upon an act of law, which the DPCMs are not. And for this reason, the DPCM was deemed inapplicable and defendant acquitted.
Did that have any political impact? So any political debate on this? Any reorganization of the legal framework then? Or was it just that the defendant was acquitted?
Well, this is pretty fresh because it's a last week judgment, but of course a debate was sparked and probably rules are going to be rewritten accordingly because many other judges might follow through this kind of reasoning, but it's too early to say, at least for the judgment I spoke about.
Okay, I see. Biagio, you are probably also the one who can report in the best way possible, in our team at least, on the situation at universities. So what exactly is the case at the moment, and how do studies look like at the moment, and how do exams look like at the moment?
Yeah, so basically, it differs from university to university. There's not a general rule because the rectors of each university have a certain degree of freedom in deciding what exactly to do, of course, according to the risk level where the university is located in Italy. And the situation is quite different from university to university. And generally speaking, one could say that in lower risk areas, then can be classes in presence, but they're not mandated. So students can choose whether to follow online classes or be in presence, of course, within a certain percentage of the official capacity of classes. And of course, in higher risk areas, such as the red zones, everything is remote. And for what concerns exams, again, it depends on from university to university and sometimes from professor to professor. For what I can say, basically, what happens is that exams in the way they're carried were sometimes drastically changed. So for instance, regarding law, many exams usually are taken orally, and they were shifted to written exams and vice versa, depending on how the professor sees fit to take these kind of exams. The problem with this is that now students face a kind of double anxiety of taking exams remotely. The first anxiety, of course, is the exam itself. But the second one is that sometimes the IT infrastructure is not strong enough to support all the candidates, and sometimes it crashes. So it has happened that students were unable to take exams because the platform they were taking it in crashed. And so, of course, this rises the level of stress of students. But otherwise, it seems to be holding for the moment.
I see. Perhaps to wrap this up, Catherine and Biagio, are there any resources on the web or in any English journals, etc., on the situation? If somebody would like to dig deeper into the situation, what would you recommend?
So I think in general, an overview of what is happening, what the applicable rules are, as these are very, very flexible and changing almost on a weekly basis now, is to check the website of the Ministry of Health, which is very informative in English as well. And then from a more academic level, there aren't so many resources available in English, but for example, there is on the human rights aspect and the constitutional aspect that we discussed in the cases, there is a very good interview with the judge of the Constitutional Court, Professor Sabino Cassese, on our website. It's Alex Magazine. So I think for the listeners, this is a really good source in English, and it's really goes through all the main legal issues. Otherwise, there are also some journal articles, such as a piece by Nicola Canestrini, which is more on the criminal law aspect on the New Journal of European Criminal Law. Otherwise, for shorter info, there are also lots of Italian law firms publishing in English some opinions on the law.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you so much, Biagio. We will put all the resources and all the links into the show notes of this edition. Thank you so much for your time. All the best for the rest of the day. Stay connected, stay interested, and in particular, stay as healthy as possible. See you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.